From the overall concept seeming too good to be true, to the technology being still in its infancy, here's why vertical farming is not the way of the future. To some people, the future of food production lies in taking crops to new heights. Literally. The possibility of growing food locally in highly controlled environments while being resilient to the ever-changing outside world may sound like it's too good to be true. This particular method of growing crops is slowly but surely transforming the way we grow food. Some people believe the world may even forget all about traditional farming methods. Instead of crops growing in huge fields or humid old greenhouses, imagine them flourishing in giant skyscrapers. Vertical farming is all about making the most of vertical space available and reaching new levels of efficiency with crop production. It comes with its fair share of benefits, and they definitely go beyond that typical no-soil sunlight stuff. Right now, these vertical farms look like a major solution to problems related to global food shortages. Compared to traditional farming, this unusual method uses a fraction of the resources needed. You heard that right. I'm talking about a whopping 95% reduction in water consumption, because vertical farms use a minimal amount of water compared to a regular farm. The methods that are used are either hydroponic, which means that the plants are grown in a basin full of water and nutrients, or aeroponic, where the crop roots are sprayed with water or mist enriched with nutrients. In both these methods, all the water's directly absorbed by the plant with zero wastage. The exact amount of water needed for the plant is the exact amount that ends up being used. In fact, this farming method even promotes the recycling of water, where black water and urban waste can be composted to be used for farming inside the facility. At this point, they're almost like superheroes of farming, because their production rate is nothing less than stunning. And some of these farms can grow veggies as quickly as 30 days. Now, I may not be an expert on growing produce, but that sounds pretty impressive. The speed of growing produce in vertical farms is especially important right now, because with some countries already facing a food crisis, and the world's population about to hit a massive 10 billion in another 30 years or so, we gotta figure out a way to increase our food supplies by a gigantic 60% just to meet demand. I mean, that's a whole lot of food we need to magically create. But that goal seems achievable with vertical farming. And not only will we get to have fresh, yummy food, we can also save the planet while we're at it. Sounds like a win-win to me. But the best part about this new method of farming is saying goodbye to days when we crave those juicy strawberries or sweet watermelons, only to be told they're out of season. Yep, with these modern farms, there are no more wrong seasons for all our fruits and veggies. What's considered seasonal goodies are now available all year round. And here's a crazy fact for you. About 30% of harvests go to waste each year because of spoilage. That's pretty much like throwing away a whole bag of fresh, delicious goods. So with vertical farms, you're also cutting down on all that food waste. While all of this sounds pretty great, there are plenty of challenges too, which doesn't make the future of farming sound so great. Most people aren't entirely convinced about the utopian world of indoor farming, mostly because of the incredibly high costs that come with it. First, these entire systems cost a heck of a lot to build. Freight Farms in Boston developed a shipping container system that costs $85,000 per container. That is a crazy sum for a box that basically grows herbs and greens. Just a single container comes at the cost of 10 acres of prime farmland, which is also a better choice in terms of investment. If you think about it, farmland has the added benefit of appreciating its value over time, while a big old metal box will likely decrease in value after a couple of years. And then there's the question of energy. Since vertical farming doesn't use natural sunlight to grow plants, it makes use of artificial lighting to compensate, which requires a lot of energy. On average, it takes 1,200 kilowatt hours of electricity to run the LEDs needed to produce only 2 pounds of crops. That sounds very high. A shipping container farm, on the other hand, can easily use up to 80 kilowatt hours of electricity in a single day to power all the pumps and lights. That's almost 3 times as much electricity used as a typical American home, and about 8 times more power used by an average apartment home in San Francisco. This roughly means this system's emitting more than 40,000 pounds of CO2 per year, and this is just for one container alone. none of it feels necessary. Firm believers of these indoor farms suggest that the high amounts of energy used can be offset by powering them with renewable energy instead, specifically solar energy, to make everything carbon neutral. While this might sound like a good idea on the surface, if you take a minute to really think about this, these farms want to use solar panels to collect natural sunlight, convert that into electricity, and then use it to power artificial sunlight. So it's like trying to replace the sun with the sun. At this point, do we even need to replace the sun? Because last time I checked, it was shining pretty brightly outside. Of all things to worry about in agricultural farming, sunlight that's available for free surely isn't one of them. And any system that wants to replace the sun in order to grow produce is probably not the best of ideas. As amazing as the idea of vertical farming may sound, these things have their limitations and definitely can't grow all types of vegetables. Typically, you can expect to see herbs, leafy greens, and tomatoes because these can grow quickly. So feel free to call them the MVPs of vertical farms. But if you're a fan of potatoes, rice, or wheat, sorry to burst your bubble, but they definitely can't grow in these indoor structures. While all that expensive artificial sunlight provides the means for photosynthesis to occur, they still can't produce the perfect cocktail of light and heat to trigger development stages in plants, like telling them when to put on fruit. There's also a bunch of crops that need wind to develop tall and powerful stalks, which are needed at a later point to carry heavy loads before they're harvested. A second disadvantage is that the greens, the only thing being produced in these indoor farms right now, can be pricier compared to those produced traditionally. If you're wondering why, it's because they require some serious setup that forces those high costs we talked about. Think expensive tech, lighting, and experienced growers on the ground to make sure things are running smoothly. All of these factors make them severely limited, and they have a really hard time growing stuff other than simple greens. Vertical farms might be able to give us the occasional salads and garnishes, but you can forget about them ending world hunger. And let's not forget the fact that growing crops in these restricted spaces probably means that we're swapping out heavy farming machinery with human labor. While that may sound environmentally friendly, there's the question of who's going to own these massive tech facilities. And who's going to be doing the heavy lifting in these high-tech farms? Will it be a fair and equitable division of labor, or will we see the same old story of underpaid and overworked labor repeating itself? None of these questions have been answered in cases that are making use of vertical farming. It's pretty obvious that the concept is still in its infancy right now. We need a lot of market testing, research, and development to determine if the method is going to be commercially viable enough in other areas, and go beyond its capacity to produce the typical leafy lettuce and tomatoes. There also needs to be a high number of success stories before we can say that vertical farming has the capacity to change the way food travels to our tables. It may not be able to feed the whole world right now, but with its fair share of benefits and massive potential, maybe the future of food can be improved without incurring the expensive costs that come with it. So, there you have it. From the technology being still in its infancy to the overall concept seeming too good to be true, that was why vertical farming is not the way of the future.